Guys, we've got an amazing podcast for you today with my good friend, Super Dave Harrington. This guy was a maker of warriors for years and years, U.S. Army Special Operations dude. We're going to dig in to the mindset that you need to have when training to win in violence, training to win at life, uh, digging into all the nuts and bolts that kind of he invested his life into over 30 years in that space. Let's get right at it. And as always, this podcast brought to you by Ignis Lux Coffee. Got the shirt on. You can order one of those on the website too. Made with love. Delicious. Let's get right into this podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to yet another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast. Got a special guest today, my friend Super Dave Harrington. He's been on the show before, but we wanted to circle back and share some of the stuff that we've been talking about just in private phone conversations. I thought, since so many of you guys train, shoot, teach, instruct, and maybe not even in the firearms or martial arts field, but in any part of life, if you are teaching, if you are in management over people, some of these things that we've been talking about, I feel will be of value to you. So we're going to dig right in with Super Dave Harrington. Dave, how you doing, man?
Hey, good morning, Mickey. How you doing, bro? I'm doing
I'm
well.
doing great.
Yep.
Peeking past you, it almost looked like there was snow on the ground out your door in Florida, but I know that's not the case. The lighting
It had to be light, yeah. No sweat, man. It's been really nice down here.
I like it.
Mid to high 70s, low 80s. Perfect weather, man.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what that area is all about. So, just brief background. You were United States Army Green Beret, and I think
Correct.
like one of the things that I'll say claim to fame. You were one of the guys at Range 37 at Fort Bragg. Now it's got a different name. What is it called now?
I have no idea, man. It'll always be Fort Bragg to me.
Fort Bragg to you.
Yeah. I think
What?
it's Fort Victory now.
Okay.
I don't know why that comes to mind, but don't hold me to that.
We'll have to look it up after the fact. I'm sure somebody will throw it in the comments section. So, just for the listener, what is Range 37 at Fort Bragg?
What is it? Or
yeah, what is it? What is that all about?
It's actually the resident facility at Bragg for the organization or the unit, Delta Company, 2nd Battalion of the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and Schools. It is the 2nd Battalion is the Advanced Skills Battalion of the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center. And Range 37 runs a classified no foreign program called SFARTIC, which stands for the Special Forces Advanced Reconnaissance, Target Analysis, and Exploitations Techniques course.
That's a mouthful.
It's a big buzzword for door kicking and stuff like that. Actions in the objective, blah, blah, blah. Asset recovery type operations.
High speed, cool guy stuff.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, there are circumstances where guys, make it into group and go straight to that mechanism and to a like organization in group. But the normal feed is basically guys that have already proven themselves and have anywhere from 4 to 6 years team time, and then make their way into that mechanism.
So not every Green Beret goes to the SFARTIC program.
No, not at all.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, it's kind of a very low percentage of guys. Um, if you look at it on the scale of group as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the thing about it is, um, I actually did 2 tours there, um, in the same duty position as the non-commissioned officer in charge of the combat marksmanship portion of that program, 8-week program. And I was asked to come back in 2000. I had planned on retiring, but I was asked to return to 37 in preparation for the war. Basically, um, my responsibility upon return was to not only address what they currently had going on, but train up additional cadre personnel to handle the expansion of running additional programs. You know what I mean? I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to get into, specifics of, this, that, or the other thing over there. And you can certainly understand why. But the it was a lot of work, but we all had a good time doing it. You know what I mean?
So when you went back in 2000-ish, how many years were you there before you finally retired?
Oh, just I would say briefly about 2.5 years.
So when you went back there, that's when you started to work on like rewriting a lot of the training materials there, right?
Well, I didn't necessarily rewrite anything. You know how things kind of ebb and flow, and
Mm-hmm.
in respect to what I did, my first go round was December 92 to sometime in 96. I can't remember, mid summertime of 96 or something like that. I don't actually remember. Um, I remember the circumstances of leaving that unit, but I don't remember the when I left. But it was 96 time frame. I didn't so much, you know how things ebb and flow with different personalities, new sheriff in town, blah, blah, blah. I was asked to return because of two things. One, I was more than qualified to do the job, but the organization put their faith in me to handle the responsibility of the expansion and
Hmm.
everything that was going to take, right? So upon my return in 2000, I did do a complete review of what was happening and how it was happening. And let's just say I heavily modified it in the interest of professionalism on the highest level in order for the war preparation and
Gotcha.
the internal expansion that was going to be required not only of the staff, but the actual force, because additional like units were stood up uh, within special forces groups.
I see.
You see what I
So
mean?
like miniature programs of that big program is kind of what I'm hearing.
No. Uh,
No.
let's say, for example, at that time, third special forces group located at Bragg did not have a SIF, or a sync and extremis force. You follow me? They
Tell
didn't
the
have they
tell the
didn't have
viewers
that war fighting mechanism.
tell the viewers listeners what SIF is, and that did those used to be called a CRIF, or was it a SIF then a
Well,
CRIF?
it's new sheriff in town, new buzzwords, new abbreviations.
I guess
It's
doesn't matter.
it's
Yeah.
all the same thing. Um, Specific focal point warfighting mechanism. Um, in your face actions on and in the objective, direct action organization, which is exactly what you need for warfighting. And basically, that type of organization within Special Forces Group, they are obviously trained at a higher level, so therefore can take on the responsibility of your high value targets and stuff like that. You understand what I mean?
I think so. The reason I wanted to explain this to folks is so that they understand where you came from as we talk about some of the stuff you and I were chatting about recently. So I guess the synopsis is you were overseeing the weapons training for some of the best war fighters the Army's got. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct.
For years, not just like a couple of times, but for years, you said from 96 or early 90s to 96. You were there for 4 years,
Well,
then you went
yes.
back.
Oh, I see what you're trying to do, Mickey. Tying it all together. Let me do that. How's that?
Okay, sure.
My first go round, which was December 92 to mid 96, I guess what you could say my claim to fame was, um, I not only rolled in hot and did the job, but what I had, the influence that I had on the organization was this. Having been there for about 3 months, maybe a little more, I came to understand that we were going to have a total personnel turnover within about a year and a half of my arrival. You follow me? That was what I put together or projected. Well, being a very small, comparatively speaking, small and internal mechanism to the special forces, everything was being done uh, basically on a historical mandate. You know what I mean? This is what we do. This is how we do it. This is the way it's always been done. So that's how it got done. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
There was really nothing written down, so to speak, about how we did business. Well, if that's your scheme of maneuver and you're going to have 100% personnel turnover in a year to year and a half, what's that going to do to the organization?
Yeah, you lose a lot of knowledge. Yeah, yeah.
So what I proposed, I identified the problem. So I proposed the solution that in addition to my daily duties and responsibilities, I would take it upon myself to begin documenting how we did business. So that began my development of the internal standard operating procedures for the unit. You see what I mean?
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. That's the part I was referring to earlier. My timeline was off.
And
So you did that
okay,
your first go around there.
so what I did, it took me about a year to do it. Okay. And it was a huge undertaking. As a matter of fact, everything sounds cool until you're actually in it and doing it, is when you realize how much work you generated for yourself.
Sure.
And it was a massive undertaking in respect to developing the SOPs, because there were definitely quite a few SOPs, but they all had to balance out against each other. You follow me?
Yeah, yeah.
So not only the um, combat marksmanship standard operating procedures, CQB, close quarters combat, close quarters battle, whatever you want to call it, standard operating procedures as we knew it to be at that time, uh, handling critical incidents, safety board standard operating procedures, and a lot of some things I'm just not going to get into as far as the operating procedures for the organization. But like letters of understanding, which are like separate documents between different organizations. Like if we had an organization that we interacted with quite a bit, well, what does that look like? You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah, tons of moving parts to make that final set of
Right.
documents all work together.
So all that worked out really well. And to my knowledge, I mean, 20 years later, 20 some odd years later, to my knowledge, all that is relatively intact as it was when I submitted everything, when I finally called it good and submitted everything uh, to the chain of command so it could
Sure.
be, pushed up and hacked off on and all that. Um, that was a personal coup in and of itself. Um, of course, I was duly recognized for that effort. I think I was given like an Army Commendation Medal or something like that.
That's cool.
Um, I would have much rather enjoyed like a bonus, a Christmas bonus or something like that. You don't get those.
Right, right, right.
And then there was, I just had some real good opportunities present themselves based on my involvement at 37 um, and within group and just different things I've been tasked with. There was a time one of the most satisfying tasks that I enjoyed doing was, for example, I got tasked out to. I was basically assigned to a third group team to train them up as the third group SFALC cadre, which SFALC is basically a condensed Sephardic program. SFALC stands for, well, it's SFAUC, Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat Course. Um, and I was tasked to bring this team up to speed to train this team to be the cadre for the group mechanism to run the SFALC program for group as an internal gig. Stuff like that. I was tasked at one point to be the NCOIC of a sniper crew. Now, this came from the third group command sergeant major. Barrett was in the process of,
Barrett Firearms.
yeah, Barrett Firearms was in the process of proofing a bolt action version of their 50, right? The 50 cal. Well, I was tasked to put together a crew of snipers and given basically the authority to pick and choose out of the pool, pretty big swimming pool, uh, to pick the talent to assemble this team to go to Aberdeen and oversee this process of proofing the bolt action version of the Barrett 50 cal.
Wow, that's cool.
Oh yeah, had a real good time with that whole thing. And just the people you meet and you come into contact with and um hindsight's always 2020. um I'll give you another example, and this happened most recently. um a dude named Jeff Gerwich, who was actually a, you could call him a student of mine. He came through the program, and I want to say 2002 when I was running the show there. And then he later came back to fill the position that I was in 2006.
Oh, wow.
And he recently did a video, and you can Google it, or it's on YouTube. You can search it. It's I can't remember the exact title, but Google or search competitive shooting in the Special Forces, Army Special Forces, and you'll find it. But he did kind of like a little expose video on competitive shooting and does it make better Green Berets or not. The video is done extremely well. It's only about maybe 20 something minutes long, but it's done extremely well from the standpoint of the information that's actually covered and how things happened in real time from his perspective, right? And for those of you out there in the viewership, if you have any questions in respect to participating in competitive shooting, and is that going to throw you under the bus from a tactical perspective, watch this video and you'll be better prepared to come to your own conclusion instead of listening to what somebody else has to say about it.
Mm.
But the one cool thing about that video that I was totally unexpected on my part was Jeff had taken the time to basically acknowledge me, and um, it was kind of like a big fat thank you from my peers, a little over 20 years later after I'd retired.
That's
You know what I
cool.
mean? I had no idea. I mean, you know, the fact of the matter is, you don't need. This is just the way I see it. Speaking for myself, I don't need somebody to tell me I'm doing a good job. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And because you should know whether you're doing a good job or not. You understand what I'm saying?
I had an uncle I used to work with, and he would say, "Attaboy, don't pay the bills."
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew to an extent that I was having, a positive influence, because that's, if there's any one personal goal that I have, that would be it. And it's simply to have a positive influence on the people that I come into contact with. Now, that happens on a lot of different levels, and I do it in a lot of different manners. But I had no idea, the recognition that uh, Jeffrey inserted into that vid made me realize kind of like the impact that I had. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then, to Jeffrey's credit, he like took it to the next level. I mean, he rocked it and made it um, kind of a mainstream deal within the service about, participating in competitive shooting, and, for what it is, for skill
Mm-hmm.
progression, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and all that.
Yeah,
So
no,
it
no
worked
one
out
ever
real
said
well.
I wish I'd shoot slower or I wish I shoot less accurately. That's kind of such a silly thing. And not to derail you, you're a master class USPSA shooter. You've competed for years and years and years in all kinds of competitive
Right,
shooting, right?
IDPA and USPSA,
Yeah, yeah.
and that was the whole thing. I was a self-professed workaholic. I not only spent, my time at work on the range, I spent my off time on a range somewhere, shooting competitively. And I basically submersed myself in it for about a 10-year time frame. And, you know, I had a real good time. I had a good run. I had a lot of good opportunities present themselves for the work that I put in. And that's about it in a pretty big nutshell. Um,
So
but when
let's
I
bring it.
speak
Let's
to,
go ahead.
I was just going to wrap that piece up uh, and put emphasis on what you had stated before we started. The I've not only got a heavy competitive shooting background, but I spent like 18 some odd years in the Army Special Forces, as a weapons sergeant and intel sergeant, whatever. The But I've been doing this, for quite some time. In addition to having retired in June of 2003, I've been on ranges off and on for the last 20 years. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I've got, 30, 35 years experience, doing this kind of stuff. So when I speak to um, marksmanship related topics, combat marksmanship related topics, um, I know what I'm talking about because I put the work in,
Mm-hmm.
the time in. Uh, I mean, back in the day when I was offered that job position, I could not find a definition for combat marksmanship
I know
anywhere.
you have
A
one.
written definition of combat marksmanship, I couldn't find it. And people were like, generally, well, you know the deal. It's like marksmanship. You just do it when people are shooting at you, and then it becomes combat marksmanship. Okay, I got you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Steve. I need something a little more substantial than that. But it was, and that kind of started it. If there was any one thing that really started the ball rolling for me, was the simple fact that I was tasked and accepted a job, and yet the job that I accepted had no job description.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
I'm responsible for the combat marksmanship portion of this program, which was a 2-week time frame, and yet I can't even find a definition for combat marksmanship. So I was like, all right, I see how this is going to go, and that's when I just put my nose to the grindstone and started making things happen.
Can you please give that definition that you arrived at?
Yes, comparative study, marksmanship equals the ability of an individual to apply the principles of marksmanship to a firearm and produce an acceptable shot group. Combat marksmanship equals the ability of an individual to deliver fast, accurate, and lethal fire on the enemy without hesitation in adverse conditions within the rules of engagement.
The one thing that I note that's different is the combat side of it has I would say, like a mindset, mental component that is not um, in the definition of marksmanship. There's definitely like a mindset to standard fundamental marksmanship stuff. You use some verbiage in there that pertains to winning. That's not component of just shooting a gun, which I think is interesting. How long did it take you
Well,
to come up with that?
quite a while. And it was simply a matter of sitting, just stepping away from it and looking at the actual requirements of what you're trying to do or
Mm-hmm.
what needs to be done, right?
That's interesting.
You can take if you take that definition, I'll cover real quick. Combat marksmanship equals the ability of an individual to deliver fast, accurate, and lethal fire on the enemy without hesitation in adverse conditions within the rules of engagement. Now, you can sit down and, categorically break that definition out and look at and identify all of the key components of what you need to work on and probably figure out how to work on it. But you're absolutely correct on, even though I don't speak directly to mindset, the whole definition is a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It establishes the mindset you need to survive in that environment.
You've also got like a legal and ethical component there as well. The rules of engagement, that might be the rules of
everything
war.
that you do has to be within the rules of engagement. Otherwise, you're committing war crimes. Who wants to be a war criminal?
Sure. Or if you're on the street, you could be unlawfully using violence against somebody outside of the confines of self-defense or something of that nature.
Right. Well, it goes right into being a responsible. It stays in line with being a responsible citizen.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to carry and be a responsible citizen, the only way you're going to be able to do violence in good conscience is within your rules of engagement, whatever capacity you're operating in,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's civilian mode or, what are the rules of engagement, the
rules are the rules.
local, state, and federal laws that impact you as a civilian and
Mm-hmm.
provide you guidance in respect to your decision-making process to apply lethal force if or when necessary.
That kind of wrapping this thought up that we've been talking about now. I'm just trying to paint a picture of who you are. 45 minutes later, we're still doing that.
I know, dude. You're wearing me out, man.
That's a Dave and Mickey conversation. No, yeah. I think it's good stuff. I think it's a great it's a great bit of conversation. But what so I think we've more than clarified that you are more than qualified to talk about the stuff that we're talking about. So you spent a lifetime doing this stuff. You spent a lifetime teaching this stuff, and kind of full circle. Like, I remember when I first started seeking professional firearms training, the only people doing it were cops, NRA, and maybe there was like some type of shooting club, like at a range, and then military guys. And usually, all three of those guys, there were overlaps. Like the cop teaching the class, he was a Vietnam vet, or the guys at the range, they were World War II or Korean War vets. So everything seemed to come from vets or coppers. And when I took the hunter safety program, all those guys were old cops or old vets or both. So fast forward to today, now myself in this category, there are thousands and thousands of people that are teaching, I do some air quotes, that are teaching defensive firearm stuff, concealed carry stuff, competitive shooting stuff, a conglomeration of all of that. And most of it, especially the quote unquote combative side of the house, is, I'll use the word regurgitated information, and I don't say that it's not a negative thing, but I've never put a uniform on and been deployed. I've never had a badge on my chest or hip and gone and busted bad guys. So most of the information is passed on knowledge. And what I have noticed, and there's tons of really good guys, is it seems like people miss minor, not, I shouldn't say minor, they miss specific components that are like, it's like pulling the flywheel out of an engine or the rear end out of a car. Like without this piece, it ain't gonna work. And you've got almost a whole car, but like you took the starter out or you took the right
Right.
rear wheel off. And what I always appreciated about your training, and you're not for everybody. I would say that to anybody listening. You're not for everybody in the sense you don't go to the range with Dave to screw around. Um, I've trained with you for numerous hours on different occasions, and you're there to train. Like we'll screw around and bullshit later having burgers, but like when we're here to train. And I think sometimes uh, especially now with the massive amount of people teaching, it's uh it's interesting. So kind of I thought about it when you were talking about range 37. My friend Joel Gupton, he was an 18 Delta. He talked a lot about tacit knowledge, and as a medic, he talked a lot about in the medical training that he did working with us. He talked a lot about the knowledge that was passed on to him that was never written down. And maybe some anecdotal story like another medic learned something in the field, and he told Joel, and Joel told somebody else, and it's that stuff you did at 37, you're like, hey, we better put all this stuff on paper so the next guy doesn't forget it, because there might be some important shit that that guy doesn't understand is important or that he forgets to pass on. Because you were talking the other day about doing a couple day gig, and you said it's never enough time. And so that's why we write the stuff down. So anyway, my point is there's all these dudes out there doing stuff now, and I think there's a lot of missing parts. And then here's something I get all the time. Yeah, I'm doing concealed carry classes now. I'm just doing like low level basic stuff. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Like you're teaching people to carry guns out in the world at Walmart, at their church, at places where kids are and other people. Like what part is low level about that? You got a loaded weapon on your body out in public, and you're teaching people to use it to basically incapacitate or kill another human being. What part can you take out that makes that like low level? So,
Right.
like, that's kind of what I want to talk about with you the rest of the time we have is when you're training people or putting together a package of training, like, what's that all look like? And I know we could talk for hours about this stuff.
Yeah, but you know what I think is very cool is you kind of opening up with that point of interest about the missing pieces, uh, the mentality or the attitude towards I just do low level stuff is spot on because there is no, uh, let me put it to you this way. I'm very serious about what I do and how I do it because, in a sense, I really don't know off the top of my head who does um, similar things to what I do or how I do it. You know what I mean?
I
Um,
think so.
there's nothing, I mean, think about this for a second. What could I possibly say or do that is going to make my or your interaction with firearms any less dangerous than it already is?
Mm,
You understand what I'm saying?
yeah.
It's inherently dangerous. It's you make a mistake and someone can be seriously injured or killed, to include yourself. And I don't think people really stop and think about that seriously enough. You know what I mean? It's inherently
Mm-hmm.
dangerous. And how you see, think, and feel about what you're involved in and what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish for yourself in respect to training, practicing, and rehearsing in respect to being prepared to apply lethal force is serious business on all levels. So yes, in a sense, I may not be for everybody, and that's okay. But the only people I'm not for is people that aren't serious about training. If you're serious about training, I can work with you. And the funny thing about it is I don't, which this kind of throws people for a loop in respect to how I do business. I don't necessarily require prerequisites. I'm not, and that's not I don't consider that a negative, and I really don't consider it a positive. It's just the way it is. I don't require prerequisites. In a sense, I can't control where you've been, and the only thing I can do is control where you're at and possibly influence where you're going. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do I go about doing that? Well, as far as prereqs are concerned, the only thing I'm really concerned about is what can you do right here, right now? And there are so many things that people take for granted. For example, are you a good listener? Can you pay attention? How long is your attention span? First of all, are you even motivated to be there or be
Mm.
here? That's why I
Yeah.
enjoy working with paying customers, because they have a vested interest in getting their money's worth. You understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
As well they should. The It's not a trick. As long as you can pay attention and apply yourself, that's the goal. And I clearly explain and demonstrate what it is I'm asking you to perform. Everything is voluntary to begin with. You know what I mean? There's no
Right.
mandatory dress right dress. If I expose you to something that you're not comfortable with, then you're more than welcome to hang back and observe the exercise and understand the moving parts before you commit to participating in said exercise. It's and rarely on a rare occasion I'll have somebody just opt out. You know what I mean? Which is normally the best thing they can do, because if you don't have the confidence to apply yourself and you think that you cannot function safely, then you are doing the right thing by not participating in that specific exercise. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There is no right or wrong. There is what you know and what you're able to do. So that kind of shoots a big hole in the whole prereq thing. And I've never felt. Well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been to a training event on any level of any type, and people are going to tell you, or the goal is, people are going to tell you what's what. This is what you've got to do, and this is how you've got to do it.
Sure.
Well, and that's a technique, I guess, or a method that I don't necessarily agree with. But my best position, for example, if there's 5 different techniques to perform a task, which equates, 5 different techniques equates into 5 different ways to perform the same task, you should know all 5 of them, right?
We could be
Because
talking about racking a slide or
yeah, it
retrieving.
doesn't matter. If it's a valid technique, you should be able to, you should know it and be able to perform it
Sure.
to standard, to whatever standard. Because nobody has a crystal ball and nobody knows what environment or your immediate tactical circumstances are going to require of your skill or of your ability.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you may be required to figure something out on the fly. You've never done it before. But do you possess the mental capacity, and are you able to do the mental gymnastics at combat speed to solve the problem?
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
There's not only training guidance that has to be adhered to, but there's a certain level of freedom of thought and freedom of action that has to be allowed and supported. You follow me?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just a lemming out there, following along with what everybody else is doing. Well, I don't subscribe to the whole lemming theory. You know, the you've got to instill, and the only way I see you can instill that in people is to provide them the opportunity to apply it. First of all, explain to them what it is, freedom of thought and freedom of action. If you're performing task X that's already been explained and demonstrated, but task X isn't going that well for you as you are performing it, then what's the decision point? What's the adjustment? You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Do you stop action? Do you just get frustrated and quit because things aren't going well for you? You know what I mean? Oh, I'm
Yeah.
just going to stop and I'll start over. No, it doesn't work like that. Once you commit to the action, you're not done until you're done completing the action or the task. And in respect to things going well, things don't go well all the time. And if you're so restrictive as a trainer that you're basically lockstepping people into a sequence that there is no flexibility, I would take that as a negative. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to encourage freedom of thought and freedom of action, because a lot of people, they don't get that in their lives. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're unaccustomed to um, being required to do that. It comes to mind big boy rules. You know, when you hear that, it's like people will generally, they kind of throw it out there as a caveat for goofing off. Big boy rules, man. Well, that's not how it works. Big boy rules. What big boy rules means to me is integrity is what you do when nobody's watching. You know what I mean? Same thing with big boy rules. There's no oversight. So the necessity and the responsibility falls on you to do the right thing at the right time every time, period. And the freedom of thought and freedom of action required to do that is figure it out. What are your circumstances? What are your guidelines? You know, what is your gig? Do you apply yourself? Do you function well on your own? Do you function well interacting with others, as a teammate or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And all of these factors, I would like to think I've got built into programs that I administer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're falling behind, well, the responsibility is on you to get with the program. Let me ask you something. You're familiar with this. We talked about this once upon a time. That guy.
Hmm.
People sit around and they'll talk about that guy. You hear
Hmm.
that guy stories, right? Oh, there we were, man, and that guy, and that guy stories, what I'm referring to is normally, that guy that's always a soup sandwich,
Sure.
on the range. He's either, out of step, out of time, something's up with that dude because he's that guy, right? Well, I got to thinking about that one day because I was overhearing this conversation about that guy. And I asked one of the cats that were having the conversation, I was like, excuse me, guys, do you mind if I ask you a question? And they're like, no, go ahead. And I'm like, were you guys like training with this guy? And they're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, well, then why didn't you say or do anything to help straighten the dude out? Well, that's not my responsibility. It wasn't my responsibility at the time. And I'm like, well, how do you sit? What do you mean? Whose responsibility was it? Well, the firearms instructors. And I'm like, yeah, but you were participating in the training, so you're just as you're just as much at risk if this guy does something seriously unsafe as anybody else out there. So
Yeah.
why isn't it part of your responsibility to help the guy out, say something to him or point, you know? And they were looking at me like I had 10 heads, like it was beyond them to grasp what I'm talking about. Well, then if you take that guy syndrome a little further, look at it for what it is, and to hear firearms instructors, I do the little air quotes like you did earlier, talking trash about that guy this and that guy that, aggravates me because that guy exists because you're a poor firearms instructor.
Mm.
It blows my mind that a firearms instructor will allow someone like that to exist on their range. You
Mm.
understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
It's your responsibility to help the guy out, straighten him out, get him online, on par, and make sure he understands it's his responsibility to apply himself and stay on par with where you're at in training. That eliminates that guy from
Yeah.
happening. You understand what I'm saying?
Hell yeah.
I'll caveat that with, if the guy is a soup sandwich and you cannot have a positive influence on the guy, well, then index him and send him home. Don't, just because the guy's unresponsive, or, maybe as a firearms instructor, you just lack the skill to crack the code on this guy to get him to switch on.
Sure.
You're going to have to excuse him from training to eliminate the unnecessary risk to himself and everyone else present. You follow me? So
100%.
either way you cut it, you either have a positive influence on the guy and straighten him out, or send him home because he's a safety risk. Either way, you've addressed that guy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that guy is not allowed to exist. You see what I mean?
100%. I tell folks at the beginning of class or sometime early on, one of my not main goals, but a goal is that no matter where they're at in training, when they move forward, if they're on a range with somebody else, If they interact in the public with a firearm, they'll have a firm grasp on not just firearm safety, but solid manipulations. Like I'll explain it like this: Hey, if you show up in a class with Dave Harrington and he watches you, he'll look at you and go, okay, that dude's got a firm grasp of firearm manipulations. Even if we can only get the person to that point where we know they're safely manipulating guns in a manner that they've got positive control of it and all that good shit. Like that's as far as we can get you, because wherever you're at, that's a win. I hear people busting the guy's chops sometimes, that guy, and I'll say, well, they're here. They showed up. Like we all started somewhere. I don't know anything about skydiving. I got a brother that's got a million jumps. He's done base jumping and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. I don't know anything about it other than like what I've learned from talking to guys that have done it. So if I was going to go do it, I'd show up and be like, how do I put this harness on? What do I got to do? Right. So you don't know what you don't know. So when guys bust those dudes' chops, I find it to be a little bit insulting because I'll think, where were you like when you were the guy buying the piece of crap holster on Amazon or the little nylon holster? Or where were you when you were, loading magazines backwards or all the other stuff? Like, do you remember those things? Because Chopin didn't sit down at a piano and just start playing concertos, right? You didn't pick the guitar up one day and start ripping sweet licks. Like you sucked. You were hitting the wrong string and doing all the wrong things. Like, yeah, that's an interesting thing to me. And I think that I think sometimes we need to remember that. Uh, it keeps you humble. And there's always an opportunity to learn. There's something I was thinking about as you were talking about that, like that guy thing. I'll have folks call and they'll say, I don't think I'm ready to come to the class because I'm not like high speed or whatever term they use. And I go, like, that's not what we're doing. We're not like, you're not trying to get onto an A team or something. Like we're trying to just do whatever the course of instruction is. If you already know all this stuff, then you probably don't need to be at that course. Like you come train because you don't know the thing and you're trying to learn. Yeah, you're trying to learn new things.
Yeah, if you're 100%, man, my question is, what are you doing here?
Right.
You're
You should
taking
be
a
out.
slot where somebody else could be plugged in.
Yeah, you should be out on the range
Yeah,
training.
that piece blows my mind, man. How people inadvertently they're certainly not doing it on purpose when you ask them, why are you throwing yourself under the bus? They're like, oh no, I'm not. Oh well, yes, you are. You're coming out with all this doubt and well, I really don't, I'm not ready for that yet, or I really shouldn't be here. I've had people, become completely overwhelmed and turn into an emotional wreck and say, I don't need to be, I shouldn't be here. I'm in over my head. Well, that's cool that you made that observation. So now that you understand you're in over your head, you can start to fix yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let's get fixed. Here's what you need to do. You're already here. Your only other option is to go home. What do you want to do? Sometimes people just need to understand one thing. Yes, I have the knowledge and experience I have because of the choices I made. My life choices I made, and it's what I wanted to pursue. It's what I wanted to do. Cool. But you don't have the same life's balance. So what kind of freaks me out at times is when you see guys that are really wrapped up in training to the extent like they're going to be a gun team member.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's cool. If you want to apply yourself over time to that extent that, you acquire that level of interoperability with like-minded individuals, that's cool. But do you have any idea? A lot of people, they have no conscious thought as to what that actually requires or is going to require of them. You see what I mean? That's why I always point out the balance of life as well. I have people, pay me compliments, oh, dude, man, that was cool. You're real good at what you do. Okay, well, thanks, man. And people, they want to pay you a compliment and they want you to thank them for it. It's kind of like, what? Okay, so you paid me a compliment, big deal. All right, I get it. Thanks, man. But the fact of the matter is, what they don't understand is I better be good. I should be good. It's my job. It's my responsibility to be good. So I work at it. And my balance of life, the decisions I've made in respect to my balance of life, ensure that I am good at what I do because I put the time in. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're, if you have a wife and children and a full-time job and all that, well, how much time can you make available to dry fire a little bit every day? Or how much time, energy and resources can you commit to live firing X number of times per week or per month? Or, you know, everything's got to balance out. That's why I call it the balance of life. What is the return on the investment of your time, energy, and resources to be the action gun guy that you want to be? Do you have, or have you set realistic goals for yourself in respect to what it is you're trying to accomplish?
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that in my mind, there is no good enough. You can't fall into that trap of telling yourself, well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It's the best I can do. It's going to have to be good enough. There is no good enough. You can only be as prepared to do violence in that exact moment that you're required to do it. So, did you get caught without your blaster? Do you even, do you have a blaster within arm's reach? How does that affect I'm digging it. How does that affect your, entire existence? Does your existence allow you to keep a loaded firearm within arm's reach at all times? You see
Let
what
me
I mean?
comment. Let me comment on that real
Yeah.
quick. So I had a guy call. You've got messages like this, like, "Hey, Dave, I was in one of your class years ago. I just had this thing happen. Let me tell you about it." So this guy calls. I've never met him before. I think he kind of wanted to like do a sanity check. His wife and him homeschool their kid. I think he's like 10 years old. They live in a nice suburb. Well, not a suburb. They live in an area of Illinois out in the country, nice area west of Chicago, a couple hours.
Right.
Middle of the day, kid's eating his lunch at the kitchen table. Dad's taking an afternoon 10-minute cat nap, and mom is at her home office working. Dad's got his concealed carry gun or daily carry. I don't know how he had it on him, but he had a holster on, laying on his bed, and the kid's in the kitchen. All of a sudden, kid starts screaming. 4 people broke the patio door, entered the house to rob the house. Dad had pre-planned with mom and son, if the house is ever breached, go to retreat to this space, call 911. And so kid did what dad had taught him. Mom and kid are like barricaded in the back bedroom and call 911. Dad rolls out of bed and approaches the space where these people have entered the home and puts himself in a spot where they can't see him, calls out to him, says, "Get the hell out of my house. I'm armed. Cops are on the way." Does a lot of really good things. And this verbal judo thing goes back and forth now where they're saying, "Hell with you, we're coming in." He says, "If you do, I'm going to shoot you." They finally retreat and get picked up by law enforcement in the driveway. Half of them are let go. The other two are let go the same day because we don't lock anybody up anymore. So here was the interesting thing. Like, he tells me later, he goes, "You know what's crazy is I have planned, like a lot of us do, for a home invasion kind of, this crazy scenario, which is pretty rare." And he had a long gun with a laser on it, with a light, all the good things, magazine in it, empty chamber. He had armor on an armor carrier so that he could don a plate carrier and grab his carbine. And it was set up somewhere that was within reach, but the circumstances dictated he just had to roll out of bed and go. He didn't have 5 seconds to throw a plate carrier on, pick the carbine up, and charge it. He just had to go with what he had on him. So he's telling me this story, and he goes, "Yeah, man, I got all this expensive gear that I've procured. I've staged it. I've trained with it. Like, I've done all the stuff." And when it comes down to it, he's got his Block 43 or whatever his little hip holster or his little hip gun was. And I said, "It sounds like it worked out pretty good, like you didn't have the time." But it seems like guys will go out. This is what I was thinking about, and they get this fantasy in their head, and maybe it works that way, maybe it doesn't. Maybe I had a guy. Another story. Me and some friends were in D.C. at Christmas time. We go to the placing of the wreaths at the National Cemetery every Christmas and help with the wreaths. And we went to this nice dinner in downtown Georgetown. I'm holding the door as the ladies and my friend are exiting the restaurant. It's a winter night. It's like a couple of days before Christmas. And we've got a 12-year-old with us, two women, and my buddy who's a national and world jiu-jitsu champion. And I can fight okay. And we're both armed. And as I'm holding the door, nobody but me can see this shirtless dude come running at us, going, "Stab me, mother effers, stab me." So I tell my friend Derek, I'm like, "Turn around." So he spins because I don't want this guy to, get him in the back. And we were able to keep this guy off of us. We got the ladies in the car. Nobody had to shoot him. Nobody had to touch him. I didn't want to touch a naked guy, that's running around downtown DC in the wintertime without clothes on. But I thought about it later. I got pepper spray. I've got knives. I've got guns. I've got fists and feet. I train hours a week in jujitsu and other combative arts. And like, I didn't have to do any of that stuff, but like, we think about these things. And I told this story to a couple people later, and they're like, "Why didn't you pepper spray him? Why didn't you shoot him? Why didn't you kick him in the face?" I didn't have to. Like, why do I want to pepper spray the guy if I don't have to? Or why didn't you run him over with the truck? I didn't have to. And I'm thinking about it as you're talking about that. These guys go out and they plan all this stuff. And I like to mess with dudes sometimes. Like, in jest, there's these guys I'll see that have all the gear and all the stuff, and I'll just come like get an underhook on one arm and put my hand on their pistol in training. Like, this is like not just me screwing with strangers. What are you going to do now? Well, let me go. I ain't letting you go. What are you going to do? So like, people will go down like these rabbit holes where they're not on the gun team. And like, these guys have nods and they've got all the freaking cool stuff, but they can't fight, or they've got no endurance, or they can only shoot in well-lit conditions or whatever. It's like, what are you really preparing for? Or are you just playing? I don't know. It just made me think of that as you're talking. So that dude by me, though, it was an eye-opener for him. And it kind of, like your point, you even have a gun with you. Like, I had a guy in traffic 2 weeks ago threaten to kill me. He said to me, "If I had my gun, I'd kill you, mother effer." And I started laughing at him. I go, "You kill me because we're talking at each other in traffic?" It's a stupid story. And I was like, "Well, I'm glad you don't have your gun, I have one. I have one. I didn't say that to him, but like you didn't have it. I'm glad you didn't have it. Anyway, I digress. It's an interesting thing. All the work people put into some of this stuff. I was talking to Todd Jarrett a few weeks ago. Said he's fired. I think he said 6 million rounds of documented bullets he's fired in training. And you and I both know he ain't making millions of dollars shooting guns, right? Like
Right.
people will invest a lot of energy in this stuff for not a lot of return.
Yeah, it's just it's an anomaly, man. It's kind of like the way it is. You know what I mean? Uh, what do you know? What do you want to accomplish?
Mm.
And how do you go about doing it? And what is your balance of life? Is what you're doing make sense? Only you can decide if you're achieving any kind of ROI. You still have to come to that conclusion yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? On the return on your investment of your time, energy, and resources. Uh, it's Nobody's going to crack the code on it. That's what it boils down to. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because the simple fact is, you can only be as prepared as you are in that moment that you're required to do violence. And this is, as we, you're obviously sitting there comfortably, and I'm sitting here in my office at home. This is kind of, I'm going to come at you from a totally different direction on this one, man. Normally, if you want to hit somebody and hit them hard, where are you going to hit them at?
We're talking about physical now. We're not talking metaphorically.
No, not metaphorically. If you want to roll somebody up,
You hit them in the face.
no, I mean
Oh,
like not punch them.
ge-
I'm talking,
geographically speaking.
yeah. If you want to hit somebody like they're a target,
Gotcha.
you know what I'm saying? Um, where are you going to hit them at?
When they're alone in bed,
Bam.
when yeah.
Go dark early, right? Why do people still to this day get up before dawn in the military? Because the French and the Indians always attacked at dawn. So you had to get up before dawn to be ready for their attack.
Mm.
And that's pure historical influence. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it's still the why behind getting up before dawn. If you're in an operational unit, and you're deployed and, on a war footing, the enemy's going to hit you when you least expect it. So now dig this. Here's the perspective. Everybody pretty much enjoys being home. Home is your secure area where you can relax and, you know, chill out. Well, if you understand, if somebody wants to hit you as a target, they're probably going to hit you in your home. Then being relaxed and off guard in your home is not the thing to be doing. You understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a juxtaposition there in respect to being home where you're supposed to be able to relax and enjoy yourself, and the reality of being a target and being hit at home because you're relaxed. You let your defenses down, whatever. You're in a secure area, so to speak. Well, how secure is it?
Right.
You know,
Yeah. Vinyl siding and a chain link fence is not Fort Knox.
Right, exactly. What is the construction of your home? You know, can I just do a little homework, figure out this is very easy to do, man. If you've got a little, well, you're a contractor, right? Don't you build houses and stuff like that? Something
I
like that.
did, yeah. I'm a fifth generation carpenter.
All right, well, dig this, man. You'll immediately understand what I'm talking about. Look at a structure or a home and look and just strictly observe what types of doors, what types of windows, where's the location. You can pretty much look at the exterior of a home and come up with a fairly accurate floor plan of what the layout is on the inside.
Mm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It takes a little practice. There's ways to learn how to do what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go into details. Not enough time in the day. But what's the construction of your home? And what's to say I can't, oh dark early, figure out where the master bedroom is and just light you up through the walls or the window. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
While you're in bed. Not a hard thing to do. Um, so all the training and action guide stuff you did uh, goes right down
Doesn't
the
do
drain.
shit while you're laying there in your underwear.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Did you ever read um, Colonel Cooper's book where he talks about the home that he designed, his home at the original gun site? You know, he had
no,
thought about these things as he was a Marine. He had created, and he talked about if he was to design another home, this is how he would design it. He had talked about the French and a five pointed star, where he would basically have like gun windows around the building, and there'd be no hidden corners where any of these windows you could see, and there'd be no spot for any people to hide. But in the home that he and his wife lived in, he had a long corridor. Uh, so in order to approach the master bedroom at night, they had basically a jail gate, uh, wrought iron that he had somebody weld up that was locked from the inside. So you'd go to the master quarters at night, close this gate, lock it. So somebody'd have to breach that gate, and then he could see that gate from the sleeping quarters. So somebody'd have to approach down a long hallway, which he'd just basically be capable of shooting down. And they
right,
had cover. I think there was a 90-degree corner at the end. So somebody'd have to come down the hallway and take a hard right or left to get to the actual door to the bedroom. But
right,
he knew this is where I'm most vulnerable. And I don't like worship at the altar of Cooper, but I remember as a kid reading it, like, man, this guy really thought about this situation. He had dogs. He was all about the dogs and alarms and things that most of us know about. But you're right. We go to bed at night and we've got a house with foam on the exterior of it and a little vinyl siding and some sheetrock, and we think, oh, we got our little Ring camera on the front door, and we
right.
and we think that we're safe. Like, you know,
Not
20-year
happening.
old, yeah, somebody with a
Not
little
happening against a
initiative.
committed foe.
No, that's it too. The committed, yeah. And if somebody wants in, there's pretty hard to stop somebody from getting into an average home if they want in.
Right.
Yeah. I, thinking of that, and we'll start to wrap this up so it doesn't get too long. And this next question is going to be super broad. I know it can be broad, but I'm going to try to pin you down. Somebody cares about these things. They want to start training. Where do they start?
Where did you start? I know it's generally rude to answer a question with a
Sure.
question, but
So
I
for
think this is
me,
a perfect opportunity because I'm asking you for a specific reason.
sure.
Do you know what that reason
So
is?
Do I know why you're asking me?
Yeah.
Well,
Where
I
did you
think
start? Why am I asking
deconstructing.
you, where did you start?
You can't just talk to Dave without Dave trying to turn it into a Dave thing, can you?
Dig it,
So
dude.
no, I do. I
Because
do.
you
I think
have
deconstructing like this, I think, is a good conversation tool. I dig it.
do a comparative study real quick, man. Why am I asking where did you start? You asked me where I started, right?
Sure.
And I can easily tell you, but my path was I'm trying to capture something that you said earlier in the podcast
Okay.
about, you don't have any, you're not a cop, you have no military background, blah, 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 blah. And how have I described you in the past?
Super sexy, which I think
Oh,
is
dude.
weird that Dave
Okay.
Harrington had.
Not necessarily any of that. But what I have,
Something else people need to know about Dave. Dave doesn't joke around. Dave's always serious.
yeah,
So
for the most part. But dude, you're a self-made guy.
yeah, for me
For the
it
most
came
part.
down to the goal of wanting to be able to protect my children.
Thank you.
Um,
Stop
yeah.
right there. Stop. That's your start point. That's what I'm trying to capture. Where do you start? You got to want it first. That's your start point. If you don't want to apply yourself, if you don't want to manage your time, if you don't want to manage your budget, manage your resources, do what's necessary to legally acquire your firearms and all of it, man, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
So, what I generally tell everybody, your start point is with your own motivation. Why do you want to get into it at whatever level? You know, uh, question yourself: what goals are you setting for yourself, and why are you setting those goals for yourself? You know, what timeline are you setting, and why?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but your start point in respect to achieving anything positive for yourself is having the motivation to apply yourself. You don't have to have best case scenario. Oh, I'm not going to apply myself until I've got everything dress right dress and everything falls into place. You're never going to get started.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something else I'd like to expand on the same point from a little different direction. A cat the other day said something about skill, and ability, and you're very accomplished and you're a good shooter and blah blah blah. And I got the impression that what he was getting at is, I've trained, practiced, and rehearsed to the point that when I apply myself, I am performing everything exactly as it should be performed. Best case scenario. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the truth. It's not the truth at all. In my mind, I know what is best case, but in reality or real time, I am working with less than perfect always. You understand what I'm saying? Because there
Mm-hmm.
really is no perfect. It's just like waiting for the perfect shot. You'll never fire the gun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You understand
I
what I'm
do.
doing?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm burning something down, it may look cool to you, and you're like thinking, "Man, that's awesome." But what I'm seeing at the gun is chaos happening at the gun.
Yeah, yeah.
But when the smoke clears, all the rounds are where I wanted them, because that's where I put them. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
during the execution phase of the action, I'm dealing with just enough. I'm not doing any more than I have to in order to achieve the goal or perform well. You see what I mean?
I do.
Because if you're performing any more than you need to, it's wasted. Or your performance is going to, especially if it's measured by time, you're going to crush your score the more time you take to do it perfectly. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
these are the things that you learn through experience that allow you to modify your approach to what you're doing and how you're doing it. And once you kind of figure some of these things out, that's where you really start making good gains in your performance, because there is no good enough. There is no perfect shot. I'm always working with, I may look good and I may be performing well, but that's only because I'm making it happen in real time. And what it looks like from my perspective is going to be considerably different than what it looks like from your perspective. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I do.
It's kind
But
of a
you can't get there without doing the prerequisite work. You can't get there to having that chaos going on with your sights and getting a good result without being exposed to the training on the front side of that.
correct to an extent. But remember the freedom of thought, freedom of action thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with the experience that you have? Problem solve. You follow me?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example, like run a USPSA 32 round course of fire, right? Legit. You have a 5-minute time frame to walk through the course of fire, familiarize yourself with it, develop your shoot plan before, and then when is your turn? How many are you first? That's kind of a negative. But like if you're in the middle of the pack, you get to observe X number of firers shoot the course as well. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So
Mm-hmm.
you have additional time to either modify your sheet plan or it reinforces the quality of your sheet plan. So when the buzzer goes off, you're not solving anything in real time because you're following your sheet plan. You understand what I'm saying? That's where
Mm-hmm.
that metaphysical question comes from. Do you shoot from memory or do you shoot in real time? Think about that one.
I am. I'm as soon as you said that, one is a autopilot versus one's an observation and observe and act based on whatever data you're observing.
Okay, so now dig this. Shoot a blind course of fire.
Like an IDPA match where you're not walking the
Uh,
stage.
no, I mean totally blind, dude.
Okay.
Not where you can see the course of fire and kind of be
You're
doing the
saying you're
math.
about to go through that door in a shoot house and go solve the problem or the
Exactly.
puzzle.
No,
Sure.
no walk through, no nothing. Blind course of fire and measure the difference in your performance. You follow me?
Sure.
Um, Here's one. I'll have an identical course of fire set up and let someone run the open course of fire and then tell them you're going to fire a blind course of fire. What they don't know, because you didn't tell them, is that blind course of fire is a mirror image of the course of fire they just shot. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But dig this. You think they're going to perform the same?
No,
Not at all.
no.
But as you can well imagine, you've probably already done the math on it, dude. How different will the performances be? Exact
Um,
same course of fire, but they had the opportunity to prepare their own sheet plan and fire it versus going into it being told it is a blind course of fire. How long do you think it's going to take them to recognize that, oh, this is the same and I can shift gears? You understand what I'm saying? It's just not going to
yeah,
be the same.
yeah. You got that processing time built in there.
Exactly. But do
Mm-hmm.
you know, what's your level of mental organization? What's your level of mental and physical coordination? What is your level of mental and physical synchronization? Okay, so now dig this. From a timing perspective, we're going to talk about timing real quick, and then I'll index. If you say this is going to take X amount of time, how do you know that? You know, do you have a sense of timing in respect to what you know and are able to do in a measurable amount of time that you could look at a course of fire and come up with a fairly accurate uh it's almost like a bracket,
Mm-hmm.
maybe with bracket racing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what's your bracket on this course of fire? Well, you look at it, and based on what you know of your ability, you say I can do this in 10 seconds. You know, no more than 10 seconds. Or, you know, give yourself a window. I can do this, you know, between 9 and 10 seconds. You understand what I'm saying?
I
And
do.
then see what happens. What is your sense of timing? So dig this. From a standpoint of making a decision and taking action, no matter what you do or how you do it, from a training perspective, the one thing that I always key on is how much time transpires between the decision and the action. You know, there's many different decision points that you have to make, and you know, we haven't harnessed the power of the human mind yet. But dig this. For the sake of conversation, you make a decision. How much time transpires before you initiate action required of the decision? You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So what I look at is at the higher levels of training and conditioning, what I always strive to do, one of my primary goals of training, practicing, and rehearsing is to work on my mental and physical synchronization. And what I mean by that is once a decision is made, it can be a standalone decision or, you know, a multifaceted decision, doesn't matter. What I always strive to do in order to be as synchronized as possible and as efficient as possible is to minimize the amount of time that transpires between the decision and the initiation of action. You understand what I'm saying?
I do. Once you make that decision, slow down, or not slow down, reduce that time of possible deliberation. Of course, people like Bill Lewinsky, Force Science Institute, they talk, it's for years they studied that quarter second stimulus, quarter second response, but that's like a perfect vacuum of a
Human
laboratory.
response time being 0.24. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a vacuum of a group of people understanding here's what's about to happen when you see
Well,
the
that's
light.
actually pretty accurate, dude. That time frame, a quarter second
Yeah,
response time, action time, whatever.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
actually very accurate.
yeah, yeah. They did
But
years of
what
studies
people
on that.
fail to speak to in that specific vein is you can train and condition yourself to work well within or under basic human response time. If basic, an example, what I'm saying is, if basic human response time is a quarter second, well, I can train and condition myself to perform in tenths of seconds.
Sure.
But you're not going to be able to do that if you have no awareness of time and what you are capable or able to perform within a given time frame. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody wants to go fast. Well, it doesn't matter what you're doing or how you're doing it. You have to accept the fact that it's going to take time to do it. And the more correct you want to do it, it's probably going to take a little more time to do it more correctly.
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Corrector.
or a corrector.
Corrector.
That's it. Corrector. Yeah, that's it.
Corrector.
Get that down, man, before I forget
Do it
that.
corrector.
Exactly. But
That's
it's all
fine.
good, man. Um, you can get as finite into the weeds as you want, or you got to know when to shift gears, back off, get the bigger picture, kind of understand where you're at in the bigger picture. Um, but above all else, keep in mind that you can only be as prepared as possible in the moment you're required to do violence. And nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody really knows when that is or going to happen. You got to
Mm-hmm.
maintain awareness, project your awareness, pay attention to what's going on around you, and act. Don't, kind of look around and wait to key on somebody else doing something before you make a decision and do something yourself. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, I'm just going to be a lemming until I don't agree with what the lemmings are doing, and then I'll do what I want to do. That's
Yeah.
out. That's
Yeah.
wasted time and energy right there. What do you know? What do you understand? What are you capable of performing? And do you possess the mental agility with the conditioning of freedom of thought, freedom of action to do the right thing at the right time every time? It's a tall order, but you got to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with your motivation to improve yourself in whatever respect you're trying to improve yourself.
I
And
dig that.
that's it in a pretty big nutshell.
Once the book comes out, people will be able to read it all in its entirety once you write the book.
Dude,
I
I don't know about all that.
Yeah, you could do it. They got those
The
little dictation. They got those dictation software now. You can just talk to your computer; it'll write it for you.
Yeah, but it's that whole tech thing, man. I'm
Yeah, I
not
know.
anti-tech, but I am certainly technically challenged.
I fall somewhere in between, but I still like carburetors. So, I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you taking the time to chat. You guys that tuned in, Dave does private training. He does training for organizations. How do people find you if they wanted to get you out to do a class?
Dirt simple, man. Dirt simple. Shoot me an email. That's it.
And
SuperDaveHarrington@gmail.com.
spell it
All,
all out. Super
all,
Dave
yep.
Harrington.
Super Dave Harrington, all lowercase, no periods, no nothing. SuperDaveHarrington@gmail.com. Fire me
Very
off an
cool.
email and we'll go from there.
I like it. If you guys tuned in and you dug the conversation, share it. Put some stuff in the comments. If you got questions, there was something like we talked about, and you're like, hey, I didn't understand this or didn't understand that, or why did you guys spend so much time talking about a certain thing? Throw it in the comment section. Dave or I will see it. If he doesn't see it, I'll forward it to him, and I'm sure he'd be happy to chat you up on it. As always, this podcast is brought to you by Ignis Lux Coffee, which, when I'm done recording, I'm going to be going to the roastery and roasting more coffee today. Be well. Don't be dickheads. Tell somebody you love them and train hard. Thank you, Dave, for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mickey. Take care,
Yes,
brother.
sir.
Visit our website, carrytrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carry Trainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@carrytrainer.com or carrytrainer.com. Ooh, that's so nice and toasty. Chilly winter day. Hey, want to make sure that you guys know that this episode of the Higher Line podcast has been brought to you by Ignis Lux Coffee. Ignis Lux, Latin for firelight. A reminder to let your fire burn bright. We are only here but for a little while, and there's no sense in drinking crummy coffee when there's coffee like this available. Small batch roasted in fluid bed roasters. Check that out. Less than 1% of all the coffee in the world is done in fluid bed roasters. Why? Because it's more work, but it gives you a much better product. IgnisLuxCoffee.com. Roasted fresh, sent right to your door. Check it out.